Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I rank the worst insert card designs in football in 1992. Now, if you're following along as I've been making these videos, as I've been coming up on these inserts, I've been wondering how I was going to approach it because 1992 was the first year we had a lot of inserts. And every year forward after this, we just get more and more and more. And I really don't know how I'm going to approach it down the road because it gets to be a lot of inserts. And just taking a few off the ends just doesn't seem right. But I also don't want to spend, I do want to spend 6 months going through all the inserts, but I'm not going to do that. I probably won't. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Regardless, here as I get to 1992, I decided to do a top 10 and a bottom 10 for the football inserts. And in some cases, I'm actually going to have a couple of cards that are basically kind of like the same inserts collected together. I'll just talk about them kind of in general. So that's the way that I'm going to be approaching this. And again, I'll be seeing down the road what I'll do in the future. But also, there are about 35 different inserts here, and I'm actually taking the rookie card inserts out, and I'm doing those separately. So that also kind of helps to allow us to really see the inserts of 1992. And that's part of the fun of this, is just seeing not necessarily all of the designs, but seeing pretty close to it. So that's the way I'm approaching it. This is a top 10. So I need to go ahead and get into it and start moving along. And it's ironic that with a top 10, I'm actually doing an honorable mention as well, because in this case, I really can't avoid it. It's the Fleer. And in this case, the cards are, I think that I'm overly optimistic about the card designs. I actually think they're lower tier designs than I like to see them as, but I do know how to see them as a positive. And it's primarily because of the rarity. I do understand that. And the fact that just about everything that Fleer was doing with inserts at this time was succeeding almost entirely across the board. As we're going to see, almost is the key there. And so for me, I know how to see this card, and it does have some of the things that you need for it. The images are actually pretty good. The black band around the outside is a little bit lacking, but it does have a simplistic quality to it that makes it work. The big thing is the logo down at the bottom. That's what makes this insert set work well, or well enough. I guess I should say that. So yeah, I'm throwing it on here to say I don't want it to be on the list, but I think it probably does. So I'm going to have it here. But it actually segues perfectly into number 10, which is the Fleer highlights for Mark Rypien, which is a much better card design, and it's not as successful. So in the case of the highlight cards, we would be seeing much better designs. It's easy to make a better design than this. And here's the reason why. The card design itself is actually a very, very, very good card design. It's just that it works best without the image. It's kind of like the 1991 Fleer baseball card. The big yellow border works really well without the image. In this case, there's no harmony with the image. The image gets kind of closed in. It gets kind of claustrophobic. And they do try to bring the image out, but it doesn't really fit. And on top of that, it's a Mark Rypien set, so it's not like you're really excited about it anyway. Unfortunately, it does all the wrong things when it should be doing all the right things. I think the card design should be a great card design, it just doesn't quite work. It's like Fleer hadn't quite figured out to sit down and design the card around the image. That's what they needed to do, actually, in both of these cases. But at any rate, it is a really nice card otherwise. And at number 9, I'm in a similar boat where I move over to Pacific. And with Pacific, this is the team leaders, it is the Largent cards, the Greasy cards, it's all of those cards together, which all have a very similar design. The problem with Pacific in 1992 is in 91 they had a really interesting and innovative and distinct design. And then their inserts were the Pick the Pros cards, which were just not good, which we will be getting back to, but at any rate, there was nowhere to go but up. And in a way, everything did go up, except the distinctive quality of the cards kind of lapsed, because in 1992, they did a much better job of really intricately designing beautiful cards that had no energy. They had no life. They had nothing to really pull you in. Just because you put a whole lot of work in, you dedicate a ton of time, you do all the research, you make all the right decisions to make a finely crafted piece of work. you can do all of that and the YouTube algorithm will still say, no, we're not going to bother with you. The audiences aren't going to come, and you're just kind of stuck sitting there with these beautifully crafted creations that are just kind of like a hidden gem. What was I talking about? Oh, cards. Pacific, yes, Pacific. So in the case of Pacific, they did too good of a job of building something that just didn't have any interest. And because it didn't have any interest, it didn't entertain to the right extent, the cards are overlooked. But they're so well made, you have to give the cards a chance. And when you do, you realize they're really, really, really good cards. I wish that they had more of a distinction. I wish that they had more of a pop to them, and they don't, and that's the problem. So the reason they're on the list is not because they're bad cards, it's because they're underwhelming cards. That's the problem. And so here they are at 8, which is about the right place for them. And then at 7, I've got Wildcard Field Force. Wildcard is the most innovative card company for a 1-year time span. And they came up with a brilliant idea that just didn't quite work at the time. And so where do you go from that? When it's all built around something that audiences just don't gravitate to, what else do you have? And really, card design was something they were going to have to lean into, but card design was not their strength. They had a very particular feel to the way they made cards, the way they thought of making cards. And the Field Force cards are a great example. These are not lousy cards. They're kind of cool cards, and they're kind of boring cards at the same time, which sounds exactly like Wildcard. It wouldn't be until 1993 that they started to think a little bit differently and create a card that could actually hold up in the world of sports cards. And yet, with their inserts, they would never quite figure out how to make that next step. Their mindset just wasn't quite in tune with the rest of the industry. And you can see with this 1992 Wildcard Field Force card where you have not just one, but 2 parallels. In the rest of the industry, only a couple of companies were making 1 parallel. Wildcard was not only making 2 parallels, they were doing that with inserts, for crying out loud. I mean, talk about innovation, and nobody realizes they exist because the cards don't look like cards. They don't feel like cards. They're not experienced like cards. And so with this card, I look at it and I'm a little bit more optimistic because I know how to look at it, but the parallel is something I cannot separate away from it. I have to acknowledge that, well, it is really actually kind of pretty cool. Next, on this list, I'm going with Skybox Primetime Kostakos Brothers posters. It's interesting. So, Kostakos Brothers made posters, and Skybox, for their primetime set, decided to make cards of the posters. So they are mini posters, and they were fit into the set. They look really cool, and then they decided to do an insert set that was kind of like a parallel of it. The same cards, the image is just slightly smaller, with a big silver border around the outside. Silver foil. It's like they looked at 1991 Pacific Picks the Pros and said, let's do that. And my advice to them is, no, don't do that. Pacific shouldn't have done that. Don't do that. Please don't. But they did. And the problem that you run into is that border is overpowering and it completely takes over everything. These are mini posters, which means you have to be able to really spend your time looking at the cards and seeing the image. And you have to remove the border so it's a full bleed so the poster feels expansive, so that it really feels like it takes up the space. That's what you need to do. That border kills all of that. The only advantage that it has is that it makes it feel like a set, because the insert set, actually, the border ties them all together. That's the only strength. I do like the card backs, though, I have to admit that. But at least the main cards in the set, the subset, the cards or the images read well. That's the difference. In 1993, fortunately, they would combine the two and they would do just the insert set with the full bleed, which works a lot better. I wish they'd done that in 1992. They didn't, so here we are. But yeah, why all the gold, or why all the silver foil? That's my big question. And then following this, I'm going back to Wildcard, and this is the pros cards. This is the back attacks. Basically, these are a variation on the main card designs in the set. I've never really been a big fan of doing that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it's just kind of it's continuing the lackluster nature of the cards in the set. I think they're better than the main cards in the set because having that distinction of what makes it a subset is better. It does help it out. But otherwise, it's just kind of pedestrian, and it's a card company, like I said, that hadn't quite figured out how to make that next step. So we will see that, but this isn't the time for it. Then we've got to go back to Pacific, and for going back to Pacific, we're going with the Prism cards. While I think that they were successful in 93 and 94 with their Prism sets, in 92 when they kicked off their Prism cards with an insert set in packs, here it does all the wrong things. See, the problem with doing Prism cards is the image in the middle is so focused on, the whole thing feels kind of kitsch. It feels way too flashy and it feels pasted together. Now, if you put the right text in, like Pacific would do starting in 1993, it helps a lot. And then they got a lot better over the years, making better and better Prism cards. But in 92, because of that thing down at the bottom that also looks pasted on, it looks cartoony. It looks like something that is intended for kids, straight across. And for a card as rare as this was, relatively speaking, of course, this should have read a lot better for an older audience. And it did not do that, and so unfortunately for me, I look at this and I go, what it could have been, it wouldn't be until the next year. So this is, I mean, it's an interesting start, but if I was just looking at 92 and didn't know about 93 and 94, I'd feel a lot better about this. It just didn't age well because they very quickly started fixing these problems. But here we are. And then I think it's time to go back to Skybox because we haven't been talking about Skybox for a very short period of time. And we're going to go with Impact. Interestingly, Skybox had only two main insert sets for their two releases, one in each. And in both cases, they love silver foil. So with Impact, the design of the Impact cards is cool because the images are really good. They're well selected, and the card is designed to emphasize those images. And then you have the team color for the text up at the top, which is gaudy, it's garish, but it at least kind of works together. Their insert set is the same thing, but with silver foil at the top, and images I don't think were as well selected. So now the silver foil, like I said, it overpowers the card. Instead of looking at the image, you're looking at the text, and it looks like it's missing something. I wish that they had done anything different than this, but this is the way they did it, and I think it's an absolute failure for a card. They really would need to pick things up and make a lot of changes, which they would. But for 1992, it's weird to look at these inserts and go, man, while true in basketball 90 and 91, they were not doing inserts for the most part, their card design mentality was a lot better. And it's weird that you look at the inserts here and go, well, if they'd done inserts like they did the main set cards in basketball, they could have been really phenomenal, and they weren't. But they were, they were trying, so there is that. But speaking of getting back to, let's get back to Pacific, because, like I said, Pacific Picks the Pros, I mean, hey, in 1991, they came up with a design that didn't work. And so in 1992, they did the same design, and look, it still didn't work. And even more frustratingly, it wouldn't work in 1993 either. How in the world do you do the same insert design across 3 different years? I really don't know. It is a choice. And on top of that, not only was it too gaudy and garish in 1991, and then in 92 and 93, it'd be the same, only it would be more problematic. But in 1991, at least because the card backs were cardboard, the cards didn't stick together. In 92 and 93, that wouldn't be the case. They'd have high gloss cards, and these gold foil cards were notorious for just getting ripped apart. It's almost like they weren't thinking that these packs wouldn't be opened for 20 to 30 years. Come on, you got to plan ahead. You got to make sure you have these things down, because here we are now. It takes a bad situation and makes it even worse. So yeah, just know. But I find it surprising I have it all the way up here at number 3, because there are 2 insert designs that I gotta say, I think that they're worse. And the first of those 2 is All World. Now, All World is a card that I always overlooked. To me, it was always just kind of there's a reason why it was a one and done set, which is exactly what it was. It wasn't until I started to take the time to look at the cards that I realized they did a really good job with images. And they just allowed the card design to get in the way. They also did an insert set, or two specifically. One of them is rookies, so I'll be looking at that separately, even though it's the same design. But their insert design is the same design as the main cards in the set, except without the white border and with gold foil on it. And both of those make these cards so much better. In fact, it almost counters the annoyance of the flag up at the top. The images, I think, are not as good. That's the one drawback. I think that with these images, they kind of fell back a little bit. And if the images were as good as the cards images in the set, I think these would have worked a lot better. Still, as an insert set, it's really lacking because it's just the same design as the main cards in the set. When I look at this, I say, dude, if this had been a subset in the main set, or better, a parallel of the main set, now we're talking. Now we got something that's awesome. But for an insert set, it's just lackluster. And if the images were a lot better, it might counter the flag and work overall as a full design, but it doesn't, and so it's just here at number 2. But it's definitely not at number 1, because for me, that is Pro Line Quarterback Gold. And it is anything but a celebration. Now, Pro Line would have a very interesting life because it would never quite figure out what it was. That is very much unfortunate because it started off with a great idea, and they had some really great ideas over the course. And even in '92, I like everything they did, except for these cards and the rookie golds, which again I'll be looking at separately. The problem here is, you're going to be shocked to hear this, all that gold foil. I know, just where did that come from? If they had done these as horizontal cards, maybe it could have worked. But those two bands down the sides, they're really big bands of gold foil. They overpower the card. They completely grab your eye, grab your attention, and they take the whole area in between and they squeeze it like an evil space station garbage compactor. It's really not good. And the images on top of that are tight portrait shots which just get squeezed as well. The whole card has no aesthetic quality. It has no endearing quality. It's not the kind of image that sticks in your head as you go down the road. It's one that you look at and you go, what? Oh, I think I remember that. I mean, which year was this? 92, 93? You don't know, because there's nothing about this that has any aesthetic quality. Really a big drawback. But Pro Line would eventually get their feet under themselves, whether that was because of Classic, who knows? This was not the time. This card set is it stands out among a '92 release that I otherwise actually really like. So here it is. But to me, these are the big fails for inserts in 1992 in the world of football. Like I said, I'm going to be looking at the best of, also as a top 10. I'll be doing that separately. Looking at the other sports, it's going to be interesting to see what I'm going to be doing with it. So definitely follow along for that. Let me know in the comments below about your take of these 11, I think it's like 13 that I've ultimately talked about, different insert sets. Other than that, yeah, definitely check out my other videos. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. And thank you very much for watching.